Joy Nathan joining us now to discuss the Holocaust Remembrance Week and Day, which will be tomorrow. So glad that you can join us. And what is the Holocaust Remembrance Week encompass?
Sure. So in 2019, legislation came through that required Texas schools to teach Holocaust education for a week designated by the governor. The week happens to coincide with International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is taking place on Thursday. So opportunity for really everyone around the state to commemorate the Holocaust and to ensure that classrooms and teachers from K through 12 have that instruction throughout this week.
It's been 80 years since World War II, and you wonder, do people still remember? Do they really remember and know what's going on?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of statistics show that they don't, and that there is a vulnerability there where Texas students aren't aware of Auschwitz. They're not familiar with the number of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. So there really is an important lessons that need to continue to be shared. So yes, the difference of time has created more opportunity for education to need to continue on.
Yeah, I mean, it's younger generations and older generations. It seems like even older generations, we think we know it all, right? But do we really?
Exactly. And unfortunately, I think our world is full of unfortunate news stories. We just had Colleyville last week, where that was an anti-Semitic attack on a synagogue. So all of this is correlated. And even in the community that I live in, Austin, there's been literature that has been put at people's residences of an anti-Semitic nature. So our work, unfortunately, isn't done. It just means that the work of this commission is even important now more than ever.
Do you still find there a large number of Holocaust deniers still around?
There are some. Unfortunately, the way of our world now, there's more of a comfort level in being able to articulate some of that. So I think it always existed over time, but just when things get heightened, that's when those deniers reveal themselves. And so it's so important that we have these kinds of conversations to just educate and explain what transpired, and also just understand that that this was preventable. The Holocaust was preventable. It required people to stand up and to speak out. And so those lessons are relevant today, as any minority group or otherwise may face some sort of persecution or whatever happens at school. There are lessons that can be learned and shared.
And it's wild because the Holocaust is one of the most documented events in history. With the power of digital media, how important is it to continue to share the story and stories of the Holocaust, not only in one day or one week, but just generation after generation? How does that evolve with social media and whatnot?
Sure. It's incredibly important to continue sharing it. And you're right, it was documented. I think the key is bringing it in a little closer, understanding that you could identify 6 million Jews that were killed, but to understand the story of one may make the difference. And so there are lots of books and media and film and graphic novels, those kinds of things that bring it a little closer in for students, for Texans, for Americans, for people of the world to better understand it, to bring it in a little bit closer, so that these aren't just statistics or something that happened 80 years ago, that it's something that we have to continue to think about and study.
When you see comparisons made to the Holocaust, we're specifically talking about how some people are equating COVID mandates, vaccine mandates,
right,
to the Holocaust. It just seems to minimize what happened 80
Absolutely.
years
And
ago.
it needs to be, it absolutely, and it needs to be pointed out and addressed immediately, because the comparisons, the Holocaust is targeted, systematic killing of Jews. Any other, whatever is happening that it's being compared to, it's just not the same. Unfortunately, fortunately, I have young daughters. One of them sent me a message today saying that their world geography teacher had made a comparison of the Holocaust to famine. And so we had to have that real conversation of that's a no-no, and that's just somebody who it was incorrect in their estimation of explaining something, and so that needs to be addressed. And unfortunately, a 14-year-old has to have those kinds of conversations when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. 80 years ago, that's like yesterday. I mean, 80 years ago, we know someone who's 80 years old, most of us,
Right.
and to know that a lot of the survivors are not here anymore to continue to share their stories. There's very few compared to over the
Right.
past decades. I mean, how delicate is it to also bring in the families of the survivors into this mission?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And two things are happening. One is there's technology that's sophisticated that allows survivors to be interviewed. And so in a museum like the Dallas Holocaust Memorial Museum, you could go, and as students or members of the public could go in and really have a conversation with a survivor. Not and the survivor is really like a graphic. It's a hologram of a person who can be able to share their experience, and any question that somebody can asks, the hologram can come back and answer. So that's one way to make it feel like a real conversation. But that second and third generation, those families that are sharing those stories are equally critical, because it's important to be out there and to talk about this regularly. While we are very pleased to have this week to be able to acknowledge Holocaust Remembrance Week, it doesn't have to be 1 week that this can happen. It should be something that can be talked about and shared throughout the calendar year.
When we talk about making those comparisons to COVID and such, does that also lead to an opportunity to make sure that the kids especially know just what a real Holocaust is?
Yes, absolutely. And that's where this kind of week is an important opportunity to teach them, so that they can draw that distinction, because it's very easy, and we see it in many forms, where there are these comparisons to the Holocaust that are just, they're not appropriate. And if you don't have that backing, you may not understand that that's not, that there's really no comparison.
If our listeners may not be in that K through 12 program that you're launching this week, how else can we remember the Holocaust this week and participate?
So there are many commemorative ceremonies that are taking place. I'll plug our website, which is thgaac.texas.gov. And that's really a hub of information for activities, whether your listeners are in any part of Texas. We share what is happening at the various museums. We also just share what's happening at the US HMM out of DC, or programming that's happening in Israel or around the country. They're all free and available for people who are interested in learning more. And so I just say, check out our website to find out resources and availability. And also, if you're ever looking for a speaker to come to your classroom, our commission works on making sure that volunteers and that people who have an interest in learning about Holocaust, genocide, anti-Semitism, have that teaching available to them.
They say that those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. How close are we to repeating it?
Well, hopefully, I think I would say, so in some positive steps, what we have seen is, one, this level of interest in talking about it. The backing of our legislature is really key. This commission in its new form just started in September. And so we're pleased to see that our governor and our legislature supports this educational work. And when I describe those horrific incidences of Colleyville or even these leaflets that are happening in the Austin area, we're finding that the community is speaking up and they are actively sharing their concern and their support. And so I think that's really, if we can take some positives from that, it's that people are not tolerating that sort of thing and are speaking up. And I think that's the distinction and difference and importance in where we are.